He slowly turned his head, standing approximately 1 meter away, pointing at him with the uncomplicated certainty of a child who has never once considered that something might not want to be found, was a boy with a gap-toothed grin, dirt on both knees, and a lightning bolt drawn on his left hand in blue marker. You should not be able to," Zevraax began. "Hey, everyone, there's an alien in the bushes." Within 11 seconds, he counted them with the traumatized precision of a soldier watching a tactical situation collapse in real time. Zevraax was surrounded on all sides by 26 additional small humans. They arrived from every direction simultaneously, the way a flock of very cheerful, very loud birds descends on an unexpected food source. "Are you from Mars? How many eyes do you have? Can your spaceship go faster than light? Do you eat people? Can I touch your antennas? Do aliens have homework?" Zevraax's sensory appendages twitched violently at the combined auditory assault. His tactical subroutines, designed for combat environments and hostile surveillance scenarios, cycled through his emergency protocol library and found absolutely nothing that addressed this specific situation. A girl in pigtails, wearing a shirt depicting a cheerful cartoon tiger, stepped forward from the crowd with the natural authority of someone who had been class president since 2nd grade. She examined him with serious, appraising eyes. "We're going on a field trip today," she informed him gravely, as though this were highly relevant classified intelligence. "To the Natural History Museum. You should come with us." Zevraax's translator module struggled briefly with field trip, cross-referencing the term against 16 known languages before settling on a loose interpretation involving agricultural inspection. "A field trip," he repeated carefully. "Yeah," clarified the gap-toothed boy. "Tyler, as it turned out, helpfully. We see dinosaur bones and stuff, and then we go to the gift shop." Lieutenant Zevraax stood in the shrubbery behind Sunshine Valley Elementary and performed what would later become known internally as the most consequential cost-benefit analysis in Jerka diplomatic history. On one side, these human juveniles had invited him, openly, voluntarily, into their educational facility. This was not a capture scenario. This was, by any reading, a diplomatic overture. To refuse would be to reject an extraordinary intelligence opportunity. On the other side, his commanding officer would almost certainly have opinions about this. "I accept this diplomatic arrangement," Zevraax announced formally. 12 minutes later, he was folding his 7-foot frame through the narrow door of a yellow school bus, discovering firsthand why Section 347 had never addressed the logistical challenges of reconnaissance officers boarding public children's transportation. The driver, a heavy-set man with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had seen genuinely everything, glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Oh," the man said, "another alien." He returned his attention to his logbook. "Just don't drip any exoskeletal fluid on the seats. I got them professionally cleaned in September." Earth had been in sporadic contact with various extraterrestrial species for nearly 3 years. Bus drivers, apparently, adapted faster than anyone had anticipated. Zevraax wedged himself into a seat approximately 60% of the size necessary for his frame, his knees folded up somewhere near his secondary respiratory filters. A small girl immediately climbed onto the seat back beside him and offered him a juice box with a straw already inserted. A boy in a dinosaur backpack leaned across the aisle and asked if he needed help with a seat belt. Tyler, vibrating with barely contained energy in the seat ahead, spun around immediately. "Can you count to 1,000,000 an alien?" Tyler demanded. "Because I bet you can." Lieutenant Zevraax, decorated scout of the fearsome Jerka Empire, sat with a juice box improbably balanced between his claws and reconsidered every life decision that had led him to this precise moment. He began composing his mission report in his head. Field observation proceeding, he thought somewhat desperately. Methodology, unconventional. Back aboard the inevitable dominance, General Crahul played the surveillance footage for Elena 3 times before she finally understood the full scope of what she was looking at. There was Zevraax, 7 feet of elite military officer, being pulled by the arm by a girl in pigtails through the entrance doors of the Mayvale Natural History Museum. There he was, ducking under a door frame clearly not designed for his height, a juice box still inexplicably dangling from one claw. There, mortifyingly, he was crammed into a seat in the museum's auditorium, surrounded by small humans who appeared to be explaining the Mesozoic era to him with enormous enthusiasm. "You see this atrocity," the general said, his voice cracking on the last word with genuine distress. "Your young have seized my subordinate. Or, perhaps even more disturbing, he has allowed them to." "General." Elena leaned forward, studying the footage with growing recognition. "That's the Mayvale Natural History Museum. It's 3 blocks from the school. This isn't an abduction." "Then what precisely is it?" "It's a field trip." Crahul repeated the words a way one might repeat a diagnosis one has not fully accepted yet. "And what military purpose," he asked carefully, "does a field trip serve?" "It's not military. It's educational. Children visit locations outside their schools to experience learning in a tangible context: museums, nature reserves, historical sites. It broadens their understanding of. You allow your young to travel outside their educational compounds." The general's exoskeleton faded to a sickly greenish hue. Undefended, exposed to environmental hazards and potential hostile contact. "They are perfectly safe. They have adult supervision, and Earth doesn't exactly have adult supervision." He pointed a claw at the footage, where Mrs. Higgins, clipboard in hand, phone in the other, was serenely unmoved by the alien in her group. "I see 1 adult managing 27 larvae. Commander, 1. Your species reproduces at remarkable rates, yet guards its offspring with what I can only describe as aggressive indifference." Elena opened her mouth to respond, but the communications console lit up with an incoming transmission before she could. The general stabbed the receiver with perhaps more force than was strictly necessary. Zevraax's voice filled the command center, accompanied in the background by the sound of children arguing cheerfully about whether Diplodocus or Triceratops was a superior dinosaur. "Emergency field update, sir," the lieutenant reported. "The human larvae, the children, have... they've appointed me as chaperone for Group C. I have been assigned responsibility for monitoring 6 juveniles through the marine mammal exhibit. Forced ritual participation." The general's voice dropped to a whisper. "This is worse than our intelligence report suggested." "They are showing him the dinosaur bones," Elena said, pinching the bridge of her nose. "It's paleontology, General, not intimidation. They are displaying the skeletal remains of their most fearsome extinct predators in a public gathering space." Crahul corrected her sharply. "That is either a trophy hall or warning. Possibly both." From the speaker, Zevraax's voice continued, and Elena caught a tone in it she had not expected. Genuine, unguarded curiosity. "So, the display methodology is actually quite remarkable. They reconstructed entire specimens from fragmentary remains. The scale of some of these creatures is extraordinary. The children keep asking whether we have comparable fauna on." "Remain calm, Lieutenant," the general said through clenched mandibles. "Extraction is imminent." There was a brief pause. "Extraction, sir?" "5th Stealth Division." Crahul had already turned to his tactical officers, his voice snapping back into command register. "Prepare for immediate deployment. Full equipment. Non-lethal suppressants only. We cannot create an interstellar incident, but we will retrieve our officer." Elena was already on her feet. "General, if you send armed soldiers into a museum full of children on a school outing, that will be the interstellar incident. My warriors are professionals. Your warriors are about to walk into a 4th-grade field trip." Elena grabbed her communications badge and started for the door. "I'm going down there, and you're coming with me. Before your extraction team traumatizes 30 children or accidentally joins a craft activity." Crahul drew himself up to his full height, nearly 9 feet of offended military dignity. Then he looked at the footage one more time, where his lieutenant was being earnestly lectured by a 7-year-old about the relative speed of the velociraptor. The general exhaled through his mandibles and followed her. The 5 warriors of Extraction Team Epsilon materialized in the museum service corridor at 1:14 p.m., their adaptive camouflage rendering them to adult human eyes as nothing more than a faint shimmer in the air like heat haze or a trick of the fluorescent lighting. Commander Vrexel had run 43 extractions in his career. Hostile planets. Active combat zones. Once, memorably, from the core of a mining facility during a structural collapse. He was By any reasonable metric, one of the finest tactical extraction officers in the Jerka fleet. He was not prepared for the Mayvale Natural History Museum on a Tuesday afternoon. The team moved in perfect formation through the public galleries, their helmet displays tracking Zevraax's position beaconed toward the ocean life exhibit. They slipped past tour groups, around school parties, through the towering shadow of a blue whale skeleton hanging from the atrium ceiling, 4 to 5 feet of ancient bone that somehow felt like a warning, and into the corridor leading to their target. And then they saw him. Lieutenant Zevraax, 7-time decorated scout, veteran of the Cygnus campaign, wearer of the Imperial Medal of Precise Reconnaissance, was standing beneath the museum's life-size blue whale model. He was wearing a hat. The hat was shaped like a cartoon dinosaur, bright green, with a small orange frill and googly eyes on the brim. A streak of vanilla ice cream had dried on his collar where it had dripped during some earlier, evidently deeply undignified moment. He appeared to be leading an animated discussion with 11 children and 2 museum educators about comparative marine biology across star systems, complete with dramatic gestural illustrations. He was also, unmistakably, enjoying himself. Commander Vrexelstad. Status report. He subvocalized to his team, barely able to form the words. Target appears. Warrior Meckel paused. Compromised, so. Is he wearing a souvenir hat? Confirmed. Green, with eyes on it. Focus, Vrexel said, with the tight discipline of a man watching everything he understood about military order quietly dissolve. Standard extraction. Surround, secure, and withdraw. On my signal. The team spread silently through the exhibit hall, positioning themselves at calculated intervals around the room. They were invisible. They were elite. They were Jerka's finest. They had not accounted for Lily Hernandez. Look, announced Lily, age 6 3/4, pointing with absolute precision at the exact spot where Commander Vrexel crouched near the squid display. Asterisk another alien. This one's all shimmery. Mrs. Higgins did not look up from her phone. I don't see anything, sweetie. He's right there. There's another one by the shark teeth. Tyler contributed, pointing at Warrior Meckel, who had just achieved what should have been perfect concealment behind a reproduction humpback whale fluke, and another one by the jellyfish. Within 4 to 5 seconds, all 5 members of Extraction Team Epsilon had been located, surrounded, and subjected to a level of enthusiastic physical examination that no combat training had ever prepared them for. Warrior Kexlin stood in frozen horror as 2 children ducked under his arm, and a third reached up to tap experimentally at his weapon harness. This one has more arms than the first alien, observed the tapper, with a casual scientific tone of someone making a note. And look at all this cool gear. I cannot engage, Kexlin whispered frantically to Vrexel over the tactical channel. Commander, there are small humans inside my defensive perimeter. Multiple units. I have no clear. Hold your position, Vrexel said through gritted mandibles. He was trying to move towards Zevraax, but kept having to slow down because 2 children had apparently decided he was part of a game and were using him as base. Lieutenant, he hissed, finally catching Zevraax's compound eye across the exhibit hall. We are here to extract you from hostile indigenous forces. Zevraax tilted his head, causing the dinosaur hat to wobble. Captivity. Yes, captivity. Commander, Zevraax said, with a mildness that was somehow more alarming than distress would have been, I am not in captivity. I am conducting cultural research. The methodology has proven significantly more effective than standard observation protocols. Vrexel stared at him. They've made you wear a hat. The hat was a gift. They've altered your biochemistry with foreign. The ice cream, Zevraax said, was genuinely very good. You should try the vanilla. Before Vrexel could formulate any response to this, a museum security guard strolled over with the measured calm of someone who had seen stranger things on a Tuesday than 5 shimmering alien warriors being incorporated into an impromptu game of interspecies tag. These with your group? He asked Mrs. Higgins pleasantly, gesturing at the vaguely shimmering shapes. The teacher finally looked up from her phone. I don't think so. Our paperwork only covered 1 extraterrestrial visitor. The guard sighed, reached for his radio. Greg, we've got more aliens in the ocean life hall. A pause crackled from the speaker. Are they paying for admission? Commander Vrexel, veteran of 17 planetary campaigns, stood in the middle of a children's museum exhibit and catalogued, with great precision, exactly how thoroughly this operation had failed. "General," he said quietly into his command channel, "we may require extraction ourselves." Elena all but hauled General Crahul through the museum entrance, moving at a pace that left the general's ceremonial dignity struggling to keep up. "Remember," she said, without breaking stride, "children, field trip, not a military objective, not a hostile engagement. Children." "My warriors are professionals," Crahul said, for the third time since they'd left the ship. "Your warriors," Elena replied, pushing through the door to the Ocean Life Hall, "are about to be... Ah!" They both stopped. Warrior Drexel, who had survived the siege of Proxima Centauri's third moon on nothing but protein pace and military discipline, was hopping on one foot in a circle while 8 children counted loudly to 10. Commander Vrexel appeared to be in the middle of the Hokey Pokey, his forearms going in and then presumably out again with a shell-shocked expression of someone for whom this was not going well. The other 3 warriors had been incorporated into a ring around the rosy formation, their enormous armored hands carefully clasped around the small ones of children on either side of them. And in the center of it all stood Lieutenant Zevraax, dinosaur hat at a cheerful angle, leaning over a museum educator's digital tablet and sketching what appeared to be a comparison between Jerka bioluminescent deep-sea fauna and Earth's anglerfish, while 2 children offered running commentary. General Crahul stood very still. "What," he said quietly, "is the meaning of this?" Zevraax snapped to attention the instant he registered his commanding officer's presence, which would have been more dignified if the snap to attention hadn't caused the dinosaur hat to slide sideways across his head. "General, so..." He straightened it without removing it, which perhaps said more than anything else about how the afternoon had gone. "I was just explaining to the museum educators about Jerka evolutionary divergence from. You were supposed to be conducting discreet reconnaissance." "Sir, with respect, I was." Zevraax met his commanding officer's compound gaze evenly, with an earnestness that was completely devoid of apology. "The methodology simply evolved. Direct cultural exchange has yielded more substantive data than surveillance would have produced in months." He paused, then added, as if this was simply a logical continuation of the argument, "Did you know that humans teach their young through experimental learning, sir? They allow children to physically handle evidence, to ask questions, to challenge their teachers' explanations. Neural implantation isn't even on the theoretical horizon for their species, and yet..." A small hand tugged at the hem of General Crahul's uniform. He looked down. A girl of perhaps 6 or 7 years old was looking up at him with enormous, entirely unintimidated dark eyes. She was holding a drawing. "Are you the boss alien?" she asked. The general opened his mandibles, closed them again. "Lieutenant Zev showed us pictures of your home planet." The girl continued conversationally. "The 3 moons are really pretty. I drew a picture of your ship." She held it up. It was, Crahul noted with a jolt of involuntary surprise, remarkably accurate. "Is that right?" Lieutenant Zev said the fins at the back do something with gravity. "Those are..." The general said slowly, studying the drawing. His voice had lost some of its sharp edge, replaced by something quieter and harder to name. "Those are gravitational displacement fins. You? Yes, you've drawn them correctly." "Cool," said the girl. "I want to design spaceships when I grow up." Before the general could respond, a woman in a museum blazer appeared at his elbow with a clipboard, stylus extended. "I'll need you to sign the standard field trip chaperone forms," she said pleasantly. "Insurance requirements. This one covers liability for cafeteria allergens, and this one grants us permission to use your likeness in educational materials." General Crahul, Supreme Military Commander, Conqueror of Star Systems, officer of 30 years' service, took the clipboard automatically because the tone in her voice left absolutely no room for any other response. Elena watched him sign. "Welcome to Earth," she said quietly, something warm and genuine working its way past a professional composure, where children can defeat your stealth technology and museum bureaucracy conquers arrest. The museum's Ocean Life Hall had been smoothly, efficiently, and with admirable institutional flexibility transformed into something between a seminar and a classroom within the span of 30 minutes. Dr. Moray, the museum director, had the particular talent of someone who had spent 20 years turning unexpected disasters into educational opportunities. She had arranged chairs in a semicircle, human size for the children and museum staff, supplemented by whatever large objects were available for the Jerka warriors, who sat with their knees up around their ears and bore it with the dignity of soldiers who had suffered worse. She had set up a digital display. She had acquired, from somewhere with remarkable speed, a pitcher of water and what appeared to be an alien-adapted snack item that Zevraax had described as not unpleasant. And then she had simply started. "This is highly irregular," Crahul muttered to Elena from the side of the room. "Knowledge exchange should follow strict protocols," he added. Elena said nothing for a moment, watching a child in the second row take careful notes in a dinosaur-printed notebook, while Zevraax explained the Jerka Empire's molt cycles. "Sometimes," she said finally, "the best diplomacy is a kind nobody planned." The questions came without pause or hesitation, with a fearless curiosity of minds that had not yet learned what was supposed to be unknowable. "If your species evolved from arthropods, did you molt when you were kids?" The general, caught off guard, answered honestly, "Yes, 17 molt cycles before warrior maturity." "That's so cool," breathed the boy in the front row. "Do you keep the old shells?" "My dad keeps my baby teeth in a little wooden box." General Crahul's mandibles worked silently as he processed this information about human preservation of shed biological material, and found that he genuinely could not tell whether it was deeply strange or not entirely different from the Jerka tradition of mounting one's first shed carapace. "How do you teach math on your planet?" Zevraax answered this one, warming to the topic with visible enthusiasm. He explained collective learning pods, neural temporary link systems, quantum positioning introduced at age 3. The museum educator leaned forward, pen moving fast. "But you don't seem to do much exploring on your own," she observed. "Your system sounds very structured. Information comes from above and moves downward." "Yes," said the general, before he could decide whether to answer. "That is correct." "And do students ever question the information?" A beat of silence. "Questioning authority figures is not part of our knowledge acquisition framework," Crahul said stiffly. 27 human children stared at him with a variety of expressions ranging from polite confusion to mild philosophical horror. "But how do you know if the information is wrong?" asked Tyler, with the simplicity of someone pointing out that the emperor has no clothes. The general had no immediate answer for this. A girl with thick-framed glasses raised a hand. "Could I ask something about your stealth technology? Because me and Lilybo saw your soldiers right away, and I was wondering why." "We have been wondering that ourselves," Crahul admitted, and there was something remarkably close to humility in his voice. Something worn down into honesty by an afternoon that had not gone the way he intended. "Our best analysis has no satisfactory explanation. Your visual and cognitive processing systems are apparently operating on principles we have not yet studied." "Maybe," the girl said seriously, "you have to not expect it. Like when you're not looking for something specific, you just see everything." The general was quiet for a long moment. "That," he said at last, slowly, "is an interesting strategic principle." Elena, watching from the back of the room, felt something shift in the air of the exhibit hall. Not the dramatic, sudden shift of a historical turning point, but the quieter kind, the kind that happens when something old and rigid meets something small and flexible, and the small, flexible thing turns out to be stronger. Warrior Drexel, in the corner, was being taught a clapping game by 3 6-year-olds and appeared to be concentrating on it with the full intensity he usually reserved for combat scenarios. Commander Vrexel had a child asleep against his arm, having apparently become a comfortable object to lean on without noticing when it happened. The museum scientists had cornered 2 of the other warriors and were peppering them with questions about Jerka biology that the warriors, caught without orders to the contrary, were hesitantly but genuinely answering. The drawing girl found her way to General Crahul again as the session wound down. "Do you think," she asked him, looking up with total seriousness, "that humans and Jerka could build spaceships together someday?" The general looked at her drawing, still folded carefully in his claw. Those gravitational displacement fins, rendered in orange crayon with startling precision by a child who had heard about them once and remembered. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "if diplomatic relations continue to evolve favorably." She nodded, apparently satisfied by this, and went back to her group. Crahul stood in the Ocean Life Hall of the Mayvale Natural History Museum, surrounded by the bones of Earth's extinct giants. The songs of its deep-sea leviathans piped softly through the speakers, and the sound of his 5 elite warriors being taught the finer points of Duck-Duck-Goose, and he thought, for the first time in 30 years of military command, that he might have been operating on incomplete information. Aboard the inevitable Dominance that evening, General Crahul sat alone in his private quarters with a holo interface casting soft blue light across his faceplates, and he wrote the most difficult report of his career. Not difficult because the facts were complex. Difficult because the facts were simple, and simple facts sometimes carry the most weight. Official communication to Jerka High Command. Assessment of human species. Supplemental Report 47B. He dictated slowly, choosing every word. Following direct engagement with human educational methodology and juvenile development protocols, I must formally recommend that the human species be reclassified from primitive developing species to unpredictably advanced. He paused, imagining the faces of the High Command reading that sentence. 12 star systems. 3 decades of expansion built on the certainty that the Jerka approach, hierarchical, disciplined, unquestioning, was not merely effective but superior. He continued, while their technological capabilities remain measurably inferior to Jerka's standards across most metrics, their social adaptability and cognitive development methodology demonstrate potential that our original assessments failed to account for. Human young are actively encouraged to question authority figures, to investigate rather than simply receive information, to challenge conclusions through direct experience. This approach appears chaotic by Jerka standards. In practical application, it produces individuals of remarkable adaptive capability. He attached Zevraax's behavioral files. He attached the museum security footage, carefully edited to remove approximately 40% of the Duck-Duck-Goose sequence, because there were limits to what he was willing to submit to the official record. A particular strategic concern. Human juvenile subjects demonstrated consistent ability to perceive Jerka adaptive stealth technology under conditions where adult human subject could not. Current analysis has failed to produce a satisfactory explanation. Leading hypothesis. Per cadet-level human observation. Subjects who do not predetermine what they expect to see may process sensory information more broadly than those operating under established perceptual frameworks. Recommendation. Significant further research before any military engagement scenarios are considered. Additional note. He hesitated, then added it anyway, because it was true and he had decided, somewhere between the Tyler conversation about volcanoes and the moment a child had handed him a clay sculpture and called him Boss Alien, that he was tired of omitting true things from his reports. Human young display an extraordinary capacity for trust in the face of the genuinely unknown. They encountered beings from another star system and responded not with fear, but with curiosity, welcome, and the immediate impulse to share what they knew. This is either a significant vulnerability or an extraordinary strength. Possibly both. I am not yet certain which. He ended the report. Then he sat for a long time, looking at the clay sculpture on his command console. It was lopsided. One of the appendages was longer than the other. The surface had small fingerprints pressed into it from the shaping. For the Boss Alien, from Tyler, read the tag. Across the ship, Lieutenant Zevraax was sorting through the contents of his inbox with something between methodical efficiency and private wonder. Every child had given him something. Drawings, handwritten questions, some scientific, some theological, several extremely personal. A paper construction of a spaceship designed from their best understanding of what spaceships look like. A page from a science project with a sticky note that reads, "You can keep this one." A list of Tyler's top 5 dinosaurs, in case Zevraax needed to know which ones were the best ones. A carefully colored diagram of the solar system with a small alien figure added next to Earth, labeled Lieutenant Zev. He set the class photo as his personal display. 27 children and 1 7-foot alien officer with a green dinosaur hat slightly askew, everyone smiling. His communicator chimed. Mrs. Higgins had sent a schedule for next week's class presentation, Our Solar System, a visitor's perspective. Lieutenant Zevraax had been offered a speaking slot if he was available. He began composing his acceptance before he'd finished reading the message. The ship's intercom crackled. Lieutenant Zevraax, report to command immediately. He arrived to find General Crahul standing before the large crate that had been transported up from Earth, a crate full of drawings, cards, painted ceramic tiles with handprints in them, and craft project of indeterminate artistic category. In the center sat a lumpy clay sculpture and a thick envelope containing an official-looking document. "Explain this," Crahul said, without turning around. Zevraax examined the envelope. "An invitation to Sunshine Valley Elementary Solar System play, sir. The children have assigned you the role of honored guest." He paused. "There appears to be a suggestion that you might consider wearing a costume." The general turned. Something moved behind those compound eyes, not the shifting colors of vegetation or command authority, but something quieter, something that had not quite settled yet into a name. He picked up Tyler's clay sculpture and placed it precisely on his command console, next to his tactical display screens and his system-wide communication array, in the dead center where it would be the first thing he saw every morning. He straightened his uniform. "Lieutenant, prepare a complete briefing on the school play format. I require full tactical understanding of the program, the expectations of my role, the appropriate protocols for an honored guest, and—" He paused, only briefly, the way you pause before admitting something that changes the shape of everything you thought you knew, what precisely the costume situation entails. "Of course, sir." "And Zevraax." The general kept his back to his lieutenant, studying the clay sculpture with the careful attention of someone reading something written in a language he is only beginning to understand. "The research into field trips. The cultural exchange methodology you employed today. So, expand it. Formally, I want a full program. A long beat of silence. For intelligence purposes, sir." "For diplomatic purposes," Crahul said, with a precision that made the distinction absolutely clear. "Draft the proposal tonight." He did not mention the dinosaur hat. He didn't need to. It was already on the shelf behind him, green and cheerful and slightly absurd, sitting at a jaunty angle among the holographic star maps and imperial commendations and weapons-grade tactical hardware, a small, ridiculous souvenir from the afternoon that had changed everything. Neither of them acknowledged it, but it was there. Later that night, a girl named Sophia, the one who had drawn the gravitational displacement fins, taped her drawing of the inevitable dominance above her desk, next to a photo of the class trip and a star chart her teacher had printed for her. She fell asleep looking at those fins, already thinking about the mathematics of folded space. Some diplomatic missions are recorded in official reports and entered into the archives of history, and some are drawn in orange crayon by a 6-year-old and pinned above a bed in the city on a small blue planet, in the shadow of 3 moons she has never seen but already knows by heart. The command deck of the inevitable dominance hummed with the quiet menace of a storm barely contained. General Crahul paced the length of the polished obsidian floor in long, agitated strides, his exoskeletal faceplates clicking rhythmically with each tone, a sound his crew had learned to dread. It meant the general was not merely angry. It meant he was searching for something to be angry at, which was somehow worse. The massive Jerka Empire warship hung in low Earth orbit like a metallic thundercloud, its shadow drifting occasionally over cities and coastlines below, a deliberate reminder to the humans beneath that they were being watched, measured, and found wanting. Lieutenant Commander Vasipul stood at rigid attention near the tactical console, counting the general's passes under his breath. 12, 13, 14. He had long since learned that any attempt to speak during these pacing sessions was equivalent to volunteering for frontline asteroid reconnaissance. "This," the general finally hissed, spinning to face the holographic globe rotating gently at the center of the room, "is catastrophic." His mandibles quivered with each syllable, the bioluminescent nodes along his jaw cycling through deep, furious crimson. "So," Vasipul offered carefully, "the human diplomatic liaison has arrived as requested. Send her in immediately." The door slid open with a soft pneumatic exhale, and Commander Elena Rodriguez stepped onto the bridge with the practiced composure of someone who had spent 3 years professionally reassuring anxious alien military commanders that humanity was not, in fact, trying to start a war. She was slim, sharp-eyed, with close-cropped dark hair and the kind of measured smile that could mean either everything is fine or please do not launch anything while I am still speaking. She took one look at the general, his face plate cycling through red, his tail appendages lashing, and revised her estimate of this particular situation upward from routine misunderstanding to genuinely complicated. "General Crahul," she said pleasantly, "you requested an emergency meeting." The general turned from the holographic Earth display and fixed all four of his compound eyes on her. Even after years of interaction, that gaze still carried a particular weight of someone who had personally supervised the annexation of three-star systems. Commander Rodriguez. His voice oscillated between registers, dropping into frequencies that made Elena's back teeth ache. Explain to me, calmly and completely, why your species permits its larvae to be transported across open territory in flimsy, poly-armored, yellow containers with what amounts to zero tactical security. Elena blinked once, very slowly. She was already tired, and it was barely past noon. Another alien misunderstanding of human culture, she thought. Just what I needed. I believe, she said aloud, her voice perfectly level, that you're referring to school buses, General. They are quite standard for transporting children to educational facilities. They're actually very safe. Safe! The word came out like he was tasting something unpleasant. You keep using that word. His compound eyes flashed alarming shades of purple. Perhaps, then, you can explain to me why one of my lieutenants has. He stopped. His mandibles woke silently, as if the sentence itself were too appalling to complete. Elena waited. A muscle twitched in her jaw. As what, exactly, General? Crahul's voice dropped to something barely above a horrified whisper. Has abducted 27 human young ones. Elena stared at him. I'm sorry, what? Earlier that morning, before the galaxy had begun its descent into bureaucratic chaos, Lieutenant Zevraax had been doing his job. Technically, his scout ship, barely larger than a standard human delivery vehicle, had settled noiselessly into a wooded glade behind Sunshine Valley Elementary School at precisely 0847 local time. The cloaking field engaged with a low hum, rendering the vessel invisible to all known human sensor arrays. Jerka Military Protocol Manual, Section 347, Zevraax recited internally as he powered up his observation equipment. When assessing primitive species, observe their young. Juvenile behavior patterns reveal the true developmental trajectory and future threat potential of any civilization. He was, by all accounts, an excellent scout. 7 years of service. 17 successful reconnaissance missions. Commendation from 2 separate fleet admirals. He took pride in his work, and he took his current mission, observing human juvenile behavioral clusters, with the same disciplined seriousness he brought to everything. He crouched behind a row of dense ornamental shrubs at the edge of the playground, activated his behavioral scanner, and began compiling notes. The human juveniles, small, impossibly soft-looking, disturbingly loud, were engaged in what appeared to be a chaotic ritual involving running, screaming, and territorial disputes over a piece of equipment called a slide. Fascinating. Primitive dominance hierarchies. Clearly, he noted the way the larger specimens defended the upper platforms while the smaller ones negotiated access through complex social bargaining. Sophisticated for their developmental stage. Really, he was so absorbed in his observations that he failed to notice the single variable his entire briefing packet had not adequately accounted for. 7-year-olds have absolutely no concept of what is or is not supposed to be visible. Cool, announced a small voice directly to his left. An alien? Zevraax froze.